Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
Good evening. Had to make sure the mic was on before I was getting those looks from over there at the table there. But it's always good to see each and every one of you. And as we always say, we keep every one of y'all up in prayer as we go forth each and every day. Say again?
We appreciate
We're in the
it.
book of Deuteronomy, which we know we've been in. Okay. But it's always interesting as you go forth and look at each passage and you read and things jump out at you. Well, we're going to be picking up on where we're at Deuteronomy chapter 16. And we're dealing with the three feasts as part of this. And it's mandated to them by law that they would do the three feasts. Along with the three feasts, you're going to see it in this chapter also, they appointed judges and officers over them, which was already established before when they were wandering in the desert, because Moses' father-in-law told him, hey, pick out those men to help you govern these and, proceed with laws and taking out the hearing that was done. And also that same chapter deals with them dealing with idols in that chapter too. Now, what you see here as we go forth in here is that there has been established a routine, a law. Most of this is a repeat of what was in Leviticus. Okay. Passover came from Exodus. Pentecost came from Exodus. This is a repeat. So it shouldn't be understanding, but there were certain keys in there. And I know if y'all read it that you've seen here. And what I liked about last week is that we established that God set up times for this to happen for man. He gave him time, he gave him dates, number of days, and what they were supposed to do at each one of these feasts. Now, these are three major feasts. There was many more feasts included that they had to take care of, but this is the major feast that they most surely had to obey what God wanted them to do. Okay, and that's what we want to see here. So as we see that, we know the Passover came from where? Say again? Y'all can speak up today. I hear y'all. Be brave. Okay. Passover, when they were leaving Egypt, yes? Okay. And they had to make sure that their firstborn survived. So God established the Passover then, that the death was passed over their houses as long as their houses were marked with the blood of what? Their pet, the lamb. Okay, a lamb that was pure, a lamb that they brought into their houses, for 7 days beforehand. Okay, and then they treated it as a family, and then they had to what? Kill it. Okay, take care of it, and then once they killed it, they what? Ate of it. They sacrificed it. That was Passover. Now, what's important about that is that this Passover that we saw was for a whole entire month, even though you only celebrate for a week. If you read this, they did it for basically a month. The celebration was a week, but they had to prepare for it. And then once they prepared for it, they had to do what? Reflect on what they had done. So basically it took care of, I think I told you it was last week, it was a March and April time frame when the Passover happened. What did y'all get out of this when you did with Passover, been doing Pentecost? Because there's an important part there also.
Well, one of the things, taking the animal in for 7 days, that sacrifice had become part of the family. They had become attached to it, as the disciples did to Jesus Christ. So you can imagine that even the children in the house, when it was time to slay the pet, how they felt. and really how the family felt as a whole. They
Mm.
had to be bonded to such an animal, and all of a sudden, not that it just dies, but you has to kill it.
Has
And
physically.
not only you has to kill it, but you has to eat it. And so there's a lot of emotions involved in that, but yet this is what the Lord said to do.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so you had to be obedient to what God says. And what he said.
You know, kind of like a shadow of what was.
Where's,
I mean, you know, you were with it, you were close to Jesus.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then he was like, then you take of his body with the. Is that? would
That
be
was
like a
okay.
shadow?
I understand. Yes, because what he's doing, he established with his Passover was established, right? He went to Jerusalem what a week before. Okay, they were celebrating there, and on the day that he was crucified was the day that they did what also they were sacrificing all these lambs. He became the perfect sacrifice. He became the last sacrifice that ever had to be done in that case. And we went from Passover that was done that he was doing that he what introduced what did he introduce to us? What was the beginning of? Communion, the Lord's Supper. Okay, and he said, as you said, take it, partake of this, eat as this, eat of my flesh, okay, drink of my blood. So he did that and established that for that portion there, and that was symbolizing what? A perfect sacrifice. Remember, this had to be what? No blemishes. Okay, had to be taken care of. Now, while they were in the desert, while they were wandering, they could do that. They were doing it in their own home. But once they got across the Jordan, they had to take it to make sure it was inspected by whom? The sacrifice. By the priest. Now, where they could eat it, they said, eat it in your own gate, but you had to take it to make sure you sacrificed it right. You took it to them, then you bring it back home once it, the priest said, yes, it was a perfect sacrifice. You go on and no blemish, you do a sacrifice, then you brought it back home. You did what? Partake of it, you ate it. Okay, so they kept them reminding them of one, they left Egypt, what they had to do to leave Egypt. They had kept reminding them of what? The worship that was done in Egypt, as far as don't do what they do. Now, if you've seen this in 16, you also notice that he kept reminding them that this is to remind you of what you had, that you were a slave in Egypt. This is to remind you that you're now free of that. Okay, so anyone else? Okay. Well, we'll move on then. Once that's done and everything, then you have, we talked a little bit about the unleavened bread and everything, because unleavened bread was what? There to make sure that you move fast. That's what I referred to it, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. No leaven in it. Okay, no nothing, no rising, just flat bread and go. Okay. Then once they were out of Egypt, how many days later did they celebrate Pentecost? Easy question.
50.
Huh? Pentecost. 50 days after the Passover. 50 days after they were, they celebrated Pentecost. What was Pentecost? What were they doing there? Did y'all see that? I think it's in verse, we call it Feast of Weeks, verse 9 and 10. Somebody look at verse 9 and 10. Somebody read that.
7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou begin to put the sickle to the corn. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God with a tribute of a free will offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God according as the Lord thy God hath blessed thee.
So 7 weeks after you laid hands, first sickle to what? The harvest. You counted 7 weeks. Okay, 7 weeks times 7 is what? 49, 10, one more day, 50, Pentecost. Okay, that's when it is. In other words, you celebrate that by taking the first harvest, lay the sickle to it. And that's what it says. You will rejoice that the Lord, in other words, his blessing that he had put upon you from the harvest itself. Okay, from everything he's given to you. Matter of fact, when you see that, you were reading there, I said what, 9 and 10? Okay, it said in the last part, which you shall give as your Lord God has blessed you. In other words, a free will offering. Now, they didn't put a number on that. They didn't put how much you were supposed to get, but you're supposed to get what? A free will offering back then as a gratitude what God has given you. Yeah. So any questions on that or any other comments on Pentecost? I know y'all are definitely quiet tonight. Okay.
Well, there was a promise, you know,
Go ahead.
in New Testament times at Pentecost, the promise of the Holy Spirit, right?
In Acts.
and you know, that was so symbolic there at Pentecost. And also when we talk about the fact of how the Spirit being our guarantee, he seals us, right? We know that if the Lord Jesus Christ was risen as the first fruits of all man, and there's a guarantee that we will be resurrected to eternally, Pastor BJ. So the promise of the Spirit kind of is the Passover in the Old Testament, of course, is a type of the Spirit coming in Pentecost in the New Testament. So we just kind of like to make those connections.
Okay. But and as you said that, what was it? Giving thanks. Now remember, most of these sacrifices or most of these feasts they had was it's feast of Thanksgiving. Okay, in other words, thanking God for the blessings they had. Okay, the blessing they give upon them and the stature. And the main thing that again is make sure that you understand. Told the people themselves, the Jewish people, the Israelites said, hey, remember, it's still remembering what you came from. You were slave there and you move forward. Because he says that several times along with the blessings I had give you. Okay. And stuff. So if you look at verse 11, it says, you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughters, your male servant and your female servant, the Levites who are within your gates, the strangers and fatherless and widows who are among you, at a place where the Lord your God chose to make his name abide. In other words, you'll see that each and every time it says, I chose a place where you're going to do this. Okay. And you'll see that each and every time as he talks about that, along with the blessing, he says, you know, blessing. But he also says in that verse 12, he's talking about remember that you were a slave in Egypt. And make sure you be careful. Look what he said, be careful to observe my statutes. Because if you do not observe my statute, what can happen? We've seen it as they were traveling, this whole point here, especially as they were holding the throne, what could happen? Matter of fact, the statutes that were given, they're talking about that in Leviticus, where I can't remember who taught Leviticus. Was it me? You, right? I mean, in Leviticus chapter 23, they talked about the sacrifice. They talked about Pentecost. They talked about all the feasts that we're talking about here is talking about Leviticus. They join. And see, understanding this is not an atoning sacrifice because the price has already been paid by Jesus when we get here. It's not an atoning sacrifice that they're doing back then. The atoning sacrifice, the Passover was a sacrifice to keep them alive and then move forward in Pentecost to remind them everything else they move forward in their life itself. Okay. And it's right, Omar, you said Acts chapter 2 is when the Pentecost happened. And this was what the Holy Spirit came upon them. And that's in the New Testament, came upon those apostles that were upstairs and moving out. Okay. Any questions or anything, any other comments? Proud tonight. Okay. Let's look at the other one was Tabernacle. The Feast of Tabernacles. Yeah, again, this was held for 7 days, was it not? Okay. And what did they say about the Feast of Tabernacles? I think it starts in verse 13. If you look at that, it says there, he says, you shall observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days when you have gathered from your threshing floor and from your wine press. Everybody know what the threshing floor was, right? What was it? Somebody tell me.
Sift the wheat and stuff and get rid of the the skin, what they call it, the
Shaft.
Shaft,
and
yeah.
the grain falls and they collect the grain.
Right. In other words, the way they did it, they threw it up. They were sifting it this way, throwing it in there. And what happens? The shaft would blow away. The grain would come back down on the ground. That's how they were doing it.
They would use a tribulum, first called
A
a
tribulum?
tribulum, like
Yeah.
it's kind of like a washboard like thing
Mm.
to kind of break them apart.
Mm.
And then they would toss it.
And so, in other words, not unlike those way back when, okay, how they were farming here in the early days, okay, how they would take care of things. First they use a sickle, then they get it cut down, then they get it harvested, and then they move it out. And then it said from your wine press, okay, they're dealing with what? Grapes, okay, and stuff, pressing the wine and taking care of it. Yes, Andy, you smiling. Happy drugs. Okay. Okay, so understand that. So you observed it 7 days. And what month of the year, what month of Jewish calendar was it? Uh-oh, everybody's looking back. Uh-oh, they're looking. Say again? Abeb?
Habib, yeah.
No, this time there's TISHRI. It's called the month of Tishri. Okay, that was in October, I think it was September, October timeframe. Okay, the Abeb was the Passover. Okay, then the church year. Yes, Amar.
I just, we talked about the threshing floor thing, and the one
Yeah.
thing, another thing came to my mind. I always try to
Yeah.
see from the old to the new, right?
Mhm.
And that separating that went on at the threshing floor, that's spoken of. Jesus Christ speaks of it in a parable.
Yes. Wheat and tares.
The wheat and the tares.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that man try to take in their own hands. Separating God's own from not God's own. But the passage talks about the angels doing that. The parable talks about the separation, the ultimate separation between God's children and those who are not will take place. And there's some foreshadowing there too, BJ,
Mm-hmm.
in the threshing floor.
I think it's Luke,
And
Luke 3:17.
Yeah. That should be it. Yeah. Separate wheat and tare. When it's not our responsibility to separate the wheat and tare. Back then, their responsibility was what? They had to separate it. We're not in the New Testament. We're not there to separate the wheat and tare. The Word would do it, and God would do it as He goes about. Okay, and stuff. So also, what you have here when you look at this tabernacle, okay, the Feast of Tabernacle, it was dealing with. They were always to bring it to the tabernacle or the temple was required to bring it there. Okay. And I think it also in my study, it's turn to Zechariah 14, 16 and 19. Zechariah 14, 16 and 19. I don't know if y'all saw that. Okay. In other words, this was dealing with a specific, in other words, to celebrate with celebration and everything, and what happened if you didn't do it right. In other words, it said if the family, page is still turning. 1964 for someone who had the same manuscript I got. Zechariah 14. It says there, if the family of Egypt will not come up and enter in, they shall have no rain. They shall receive the plagues with which the Lord strike the nation who do not come up to keep the feast of tabernacle. They should be punished for Egypt, punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that do not come up to keep the feast of the tabernacle. In other words, there was a punishment for who? The families of Egypt. Okay, the Egypt themselves. But also, I was trying to get to the point here is that it was celebrate the first day of the Sabbath rest, and it was celebrate the 8th day of the Sabbath rest itself. And that's taken care of in Leviticus. So I think they talk about that. Okay. The beginning and end in the rest. Okay. And whereas rest and refreshment is what this is about with Tabernacle, Feast of Tabernacle. Whereas given the nation Israel a rest itself. But that was punishment. What I took you to was punishment against Egypt itself and any other nations. Yeah. That did not celebrate the tabernacle. Israel was supposed to celebrate the tabernacle. And if Israel didn't do it, then they would get more worse punishment than the Egypt that was not doing it at all. Okay. Now, somebody read 16, verse 16. I want you to see in verse 16, Deuteronomy 16:16.
3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty.
Keep going. Verse 17.
Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee.
Okay. Now, this says what? 3 times a year, the males will go, right? Where were they going? They should appear before the Lord that you got in place which he had chosen. And where would he normally choose? Either the tabernacle or the temple. Okay. There was a way, homage to that. Okay. Remember also when they get over here and when they do cross the Jordan, that there will be places set up for them because the Levites will be divided among those tribes also. Okay. For a place that he has established and move them about. Okay. But the thing is, 3 times they should appear, not maybe, not if you got time, not if you feel like it, but you shall appear. What's that say to y'all? Oh, mandatory? It's a commandment. It was a commandment given to them that they shall appear. And once they did, it said that it said every man should give as he is able. What's that mean? If all you got is this, you give what you're able to give. Okay. There was no mandate. You will give this many lambs, this many this and this many that. Okay. You again, what was purpose in your heart, you're giving according to what you're able to give. Now remember something else when chapter 15, when they send out their bond servants who asked to leave after 7 years, what did they do? They did not send them away empty-handed, did they? They gave them what? Liberally, okay, as what they needed and as much as they need, to move forward and go out, okay, to take care of things. What he's saying right here is this right here. Yes, Ken.
I haven't.
Okay, he's saying right here, you should give what as he is able, according to the blessing, Lord God, which he has given you. Now, look in terms today, okay, how does God bless you? Okay, but see, it's not mandated. We mandated to do what? Give according to our hearts. Okay, and accounts. Okay, any comments? Any suggestions? Any wannabes? Yeah, man. Somebody gave y'all the quiet pill tonight. Okay, okay, but think about it. Go ahead.
But it says that it says here that in the place which he chose, where God had chosen, the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of the week, and the feast of the tabernacle, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed.
You will bring something. Not only will you appear, but you what? You will bring something. Okay, it was a requirement. This is what God has mandated you to do as the male in charge of the household, you to bring forth. Okay. Good point. Thank you. Not empty-handed. Okay. Huh? You had to strain to read that? Bart Ken's glasses. Okay. But that's what it had there. Now, see. That brings us to the last portion of this right here. Is this right here was the appointment of judges and officers. Why did they have appointed judges and officers there? Verse 18. Okay, they start appointing judges and officers. Okay, somebody read verse 18.
You shall appoint for yourself judges and officers in all your town, which the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. Verse 19, you shall not distort justice, you shall not be partial, and you shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous.
Keep on, you doing so good. Read 20, let's finish that section out.
Okay, justice and only justice you shall pursue, that you may live and possess the land which the Lord your God has given you.
Okay, so what did y'all see right there? He said you appoint judges and officers for what? Each tribe, right? Each tribe had their own judges, according to tribe. And they, what were they supposed to do? They supposed
Disputes between the people.
Yeah, any disputes between the people, and they were supposed to do what?
Crimes committed.
They would dish out the
They were
punishment.
telling what the punishment would be.
Okay.
They were police officers.
Well, you can say police, or you can say judges. They were actually judges.
Yes,
The
judges.
police officers are the one that brought them to them.
Yeah.
But remember what they say now, the gate. The gate, he said, mine says gate, he says town. It doesn't, where they meet at back then was at the gate. All business was conducted at the gate. That's where, you know, where everything was conducted at right there. Matter of fact, when you look at Proverbs 31, it's like, she be known at the gate, or he be known at the gate. Everything was done at the gate. Okay. They're brought there to dispute any, to settle any disputes they were able to settle. Okay. And there was no such thing as blind justice. Or does that where the term blind justice come from? Because what you read in 19, you would not what it says there. It said you should not perverse judgment, you should not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for the bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. We want to talk about our system today. Okay, go ahead.
And judgment was done at the gate because
Go ahead.
judgment was swift.
Oh, you didn't play with it.
Yeah, judgment was swift. And it goes back to if something happened and that judgment had those witnesses, that person was out of the camp. You know, they had to leave because it's an immediate thing, because you know, if you leave it there, it's a potential to fester, it's a potential to spread around. So as soon as the judgment was issued at the gate, and if judgment was not in the favor of the person, it wasn't go get your stuff, it wasn't go, you know, go talk, go say goodbye to, it was you're gone. You are out of the gate. And at some purchases, at some points, they would take the person out of the gate and they would stone them right there immediately. So it was always conducted at the gate, because once the decision was made, you couldn't go back in to corrupt others.
Like there was no appeal.
That's not
Think about that.
And also,
Go ahead.
No bail bonds,
No bail bonds,
no
nothing.
pre-trial confinement.
also
and that-
unlike today, everything was open to the public.
Yeah, well, it had to be. It was very
Unlike
important.
today.
Just one person.
Well, see, and if it comes to that point that you are doing that, Shona, then the one that brought the act, that was offended is the one that throw the first, you know, is to go out and actually by his hand and take him out. And see, that jumps over here to 17. That's why I put it up there. It jumps because you have to have evidence, you have to have certain things and move forward. But see, it was appointed that should not perverse the judgment. In other words, make sure you judge rightly in front. Make sure you have a righteous man judging and move forward. Now, if there came a part in there where the person did not agree with it or not, let me put it this way. If it came a part where the judges could not handle the ones there, then they send it to what we call a Supreme Court, if you want to, whatever. They send it up to the next highest level for them to take care of it. But see, this was devised for why? Because when Moses was out there, you know, he was trying to do judgment and take care of these situations with over what 2-point-some million people, okay, or 1 point whatever million. I forgot the number, Andy. You know it by heart, okay. But you know, he was trying to do that, and it came to a point where no, you cannot do that. Okay, you can't hear everybody. It takes too long. So that's why we're going to appoint judges and officers in each tribe to judge rightly. Answer.
These judges and officers are in conjunction to or separate from the camps that we talked about in Leviticus?
No, okay. You said the camps?
Right, where
So there's,
the safe havens, the safe.
No, okay, I got you, I understand. You know, whereas once they get into the promised land, once they get over to Jordan, they would set up refuge, cities of refuge, is what you're talking about, right?
Right, if someone.
Okay, they have
somebody-
yet to go across the Jordan yet, okay? But the judges were
Okay,
also
this is
set, they
before.
were also set up for the tribes, even though they were in, once they got into that point there. Okay, once they got across the Jordan, they had them what? They were still in place, so they already had, see, everything he's preparing them over here, telling them is to prepare them for the promised land. It's to prepare what they action they need to do in the promised land, to take care of what they had to. It's just like the refuge cities would be set up, and that's for people who done something and they needed to flee and be within 1 day travels to get there before someone got their hands on them. If they accidentally kill somebody or if they maliciously kill somebody, that's when they what? Got to the gate. That's when they had their court and trial, whatever you want to, and decide from that point on. And if they found innocent of that accidental, they get to stay there. Okay. If not, they were put out into the hands. Yes.
and like you were saying, Moses was preparing because
Right.
he knew his time was coming short. He got to think Moses was talking to God, so he knew what was getting ready to go on. He knew that the next phase will come to the battles within, going over preparation. He knew what they saw. He knew where they were going. So it's like these tribes wasn't right next door to each other. They were in the vicinity, but they were right there. So these judges were also the decision makers.
Yes.
They were the ones who, if you needed something from the tribe assignment, you had to go. The judges would meet, they would talk, and they would go back and they would bring this information. So it was also like a twofold. Yes, they made the decisions on the malicious stuff, but they also made the decisions on what was going to happen with the people of that particular tribe. So we hear judges, when we think judges of
Judges
nowadays.
/ officers.
Right, we think
Okay.
judges nowadays, court system, crime and punishment, but these were more magistrates over
They were-
their tribe to make those decisions. And that's why they had to be wise, they had to be just, they had to be the right rulers of those groups.
Mm.
Because you had a bad judge, you had a bad tribe.
And see, and hold the grass, I understand it as someone you stated, judgment was swift and done. Even if you didn't agree with it. If you did not agree with the judgment, it didn't matter. Okay, didn't matter. And you refused to move forward on a judgment, then you pay the penalty. And when you get in 17, you see you paid a penalty, okay, for not obeying what God had put down in front of you. Okay.
And also, and I mean, this is, I'm not to jump ahead.
Go ahead.
but These judges, you have to think of, Samson was a judge. He was a judge but not in that sense that we're talking about
okay,
now.
you're different.
I mean, but
Go
I
ahead.
say that because when you think about it, that role over time where they had the clans and they were the decision makers, the judges even became to get corrupt. So that the term judge you'll hear later on still has the same meaning because of their actions. What they did was to defend Israel, because that's what a judge original purpose always was, the defense of Israel, to make the right decisions for Israel. And as you go forward, you see how that tends to trickle down. And I just say that more as a preface for what's coming up.
What's coming
This
up?
that was a very prestige and high and
Yes, it was.
lofty position or office, because they actually spoke for God.
Yes.
The punishment they would hand down would be as though God handed the punishment down.
Mm-hmm.
The decision they made as though as God has did it. Just like when Moses spoke, it is though God is speaking. We hear Moses brought them out of the land of Egypt, but we see that God said, I brought you out with an outstretched arm.
Right.
So as they dealt with the people and made decisions, it was though God had done this. See, God is the one that appointed these offices. And when God appointed an office, he appoints men to sit in this office to represent him.
Yes.
And so their way was supposed to be as if God was there, not taking the bribe, being straightforward, upholding righteousness you know, but as time went on, like I said, it got corrupt.
And see, there was a divine line. The Levites were what? Your priest.
Mhm.
Okay. But the judges themselves came out of what? The tribes themselves of men that they chose that, like I said, were high there, was righteous, was understanding knowledge because they were speaking for God. Okay, so the Levite priests had their particular job they had to do. They had to minister what? Make sure the feasts are ministered properly, make sure this is sacrifice is done properly, all this here. They were to take care of their spiritual side of the people, were they not?
Mhm.
Okay, the judges were supposed to take care of that comes, disputes come up all the time.
It's just political and
Right.
silver side.
Silver side, yes. Okay, and so that's what
But
we
also
have here.
they punished according to
Woo.
erroneous spiritual worship as well.
Which we're gonna talk about here. Which was here, when you go to this right here, religious offenses,
Mhm.
okay, 17. Evidence of, they also had to deal with evidence of capital crimes. Okay, they had to do higher court and kings. And one thing left here is that when I put that idol here, it's amazing what God is trying to tell them in the last part of 16. What is he telling them? Listen to it, said 21 says it's very simple and plain. You shall not plant for yourself any trees or a wooden image near the altar which you built for yourself to the Lord your God. You should not set up a sacred pillar which the Lord your God hates.
Like a
In other
totem
words,
pole.
huh?
Like a totem pole.
A totem pole. Okay. Yeah, we won't talk about that one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Totem poles, anything you like that. In other words, he's saying, look, this is mine. Don't put them up there because that's like what? Dealing with idols. Okay, because it reminded what? Egypt. They had them all over the place. Okay, they're surrounded by pagan nations. They had them all over the places. They had things built for so many gods and stuff like that. But he's saying, you should not plant yourself any tree, any wooden image around my place.
That's what they was doing in Canaan, and they was getting ready to go in, and he didn't want them to. It says if we go to say Japan, and we worship the one true God here, and since we're going to that country, this is what they do. So we're just going to kind of mix it. It's called syncretism. And God was telling them, though you worship and you have your altar, don't bring any other idols in there and mix the worship with them, with it, And the common name for it again is syncretism.
Oh, that's a good point.
In the church today, we can call it Christendom. We have the mix of unbelievers and believers. And when you get the wrong people in office, then you get suggestions coming from everybody, and you wind up doing things that's contrary to scripture. Yeah.
But also, I like the part there, which you brought right into 17, is that remember, why was he keep saying, remember Egypt, remember Egypt? Because Canaan, right, was in leagues. If you look back into the history and back everything, Canaan, okay, Canaan got their horses, got their chariots, got everything from who? Egypt, okay? The worship, all that came from that pagan nation. Egypt and them were tied together. That's why he said, you're going into this nation, when you start looking at this, you're going into this land, okay? Don't remember where you came from, who's guiding you, and everything's going on, that you will make sure that, because the Canaanites was a pagan nation, the whole entire land, but it's rich with milk and honey dripping, and it's yours. So when you see this, understanding that portion there, 17 gets into the part here, which is very interesting there, is that you have the basic laws of the judges and courts. In other words, the laws was set up for 17, was set up for them in 17. Okay. But you mentioned it right there in the first 5 verses, talking about religious offense. Okay. And again, we had already talked about a little bit of religious offenses back in, was it Deuteronomy 15, 14? I forgot. Okay. Where if you cause somebody to start to worship other than any God besides him, okay, then you pay with your life. Okay, so Deuteronomy 17. Any questions on 16 or anything? Any other comments? We got 10 minutes left, but I can only give you highlights on 17. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, verse 19,
Okay, go ahead.
But verse 19, I was just thinking about what we have.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, don't take any gifts, don't be a respecter of persons. And then it warns what if you do it, how it affects you if you do it. I mean, just look how we have what we have, our judicial system and so forth. And then a question.
Answer.
Is the grove, I've always wondered this, the grove of trees, it's not like going out and planting a bunch of pine trees or something. It's carved images. Is that what that is?
Yes, carved in.
Just as Jesus died on a tree.
Mhm.
That's what,
Curse of the
this
man
is
is like
another
hanging
form of a tree. but-
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what it is. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
they was only carved out to be worshipped. That's when you say they would have ears, because that's what they were given, but they can't hear, eyes they can't see, mouths they can't eat or speak.
Mhm.
Yes, they would go out to get them to worship. And I know in today, people brought it into the form of going out, getting a Christmas tree, putting it, but he's not talking about that.
No.
He's talking about for the fact of going out, getting this wood and carving it out and erecting it as something to be worshiped. That's what he's
Totem
talking
pole.
here.
With that is, and they talking about going into Canaan, and I actually went back and I studied this, but I'm gonna pull it up and I'll share with you, not to go too deep in the well. So the Asherah was the female goddess, the Canaanites worship. And right, and it was another, it was two goddesses. So what they would do is all out of Canaan, all throughout Canaan, they would construct these worshiping posts. The female goddess, they would carve them out. So everywhere throughout Canaan where trees were, they would literally go and construct it because they would just go right there and worship. Right there, worshiping an idol. If I was somewhere and I was a Canaanite and I needed a god, I could just go to that tree, carve it out, and worship worship right there at that tree. And that's what he was saying. You're fashioning something that out of something I made to make a god out of something that has no life in it. You know, and he was saying, like, where I put my temple, don't do that. Don't fashion something that has no life in it, because we all know that where God is, that's where life is. So why would you fashion something that is lifeless next to my temple?
See, scripture, and it says, someone says, I look to the hills where my help coming from.
Mhm.
And what they did was in the hills, they carved out these idols. We're not to look to the hills, look beyond the hills, you know, to the heavens. So they even did it in the mountains, in the hills where the trees were growing, and they would go to these places and they thought that that's where their help came from, you know, to these hills and mountains. So we can't, I just mentioned Christmas because I've heard pastors just wear that passage out. You know, don't have any kids and grandkids, and they see somebody with a Christmas tree in their house, and they tell them, you got an idol in your house. This is not talking about that. This is talking about erecting something and going out in the woods or in your temples and worshiping it and sitting it beside the tabernacle, whatever they was doing. He said, don't do that.
And see, when you talk, I lost my drop anyway. So when you're talking about these idols, when you're talking about different things, I forgot what I was going to say. So don't worry about it. Come back later. Go ahead, Dennis.
If you read on, right now I'm like going through Kings and Chronicles.
That's what
When
you
there
were
was
talking about. There
A
you go.
good king, that was one of the things they did, was they went and they chopped down this.
That was required of them to go tear and destroy them. And remember though, but we had good kings and we had bad kings. And they were warned about these kings, but they still wanted what? Kings. Okay. You know, they had, good kings, they go and tear down the idols, and you had the bad kings come back around and they start building back up, start building back up. Then you go about 5 or 6 more, then you got another good king.
And it all feeds into what was said,
Right.
what was being said right here. When you go into these lands, maintain my statutes. But they would go there and they would see all these other kings being profitable, successful, and you have to think. They saw that and they said, well, what are you worshiping? Yeah, well, I can still worship God, but I'm gonna put this right here. too.
Syncretism.
Syncretism.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this
New
right
word
here.
for me.
No, it's all sacred,
And-
sacred
and
our
as-
religion.
As,
is.
as I
Sacred
worship
religion
this,
with it.
this statue, and the thing is, the Israelites were ritualistic people. So if they bought into another idol, God, following, which a lot, like you said, a lot of the kings strayed, they followed it with the same rigor that they followed God. They would go in, hey, if you're saying that I have to make my kids walk through fire to get this, but then I'll do that. Because I have that in me, that inert, energy in me to follow God's letter to the T. Yet I've gone astray. So I'm gonna follow this God letter to the T. And it always, me and my sister, we was talking last night, and it always reminds that we live in this duality of us, who we are. We all, like Paul said, we have the potential to follow our flesh, and our flesh has the potential to do bad things. But we have that God-given spirit in us, that if we do right, we're gonna do it to the letter. But if you do wrong, you're gonna do that to the letter as well. And that's kind of where those kings fell. They started to do that abomination to the letter.
Like I said,
You'll start, you remind, because you're reading Kings and stuff, you see what's going on with them. But at the same time, how did we come about the kings? Because they wanted kings, like you said, because they saw everybody else had kings. We want to be just like them.
God said,
God
I'm
said,
your
no,
king.
you don't. Okay, and God what? Told them exactly what was going to happen to them once they got kings. Yeah, and stuff. So, okay, so when we come back, we'll pick up on Deuteronomy chapter 17. Okay, just let you know, there will be no Bible study the 24th. Okay, which is Wednesday next week, because we will be out of town. Okay, and probably 31st. We haven't decided whether we're going to have it on 31st or not. Okay, so I'll keep you all informed on, that, but there will be, we have, see y'all this Sunday celebrating, worshiping and having fellowship this Sunday coming. We have men's study tomorrow night. No, not men's night, women's study tomorrow night. So it's all yours, Ken.
Okay, another night. Everybody probably want to know why Pastor Allen was quiet tonight. I want to hear what everybody had to say. Now, as we can see, as we get further and further over into Deuteronomy, that could be you know what collateral damage is? You got the shotgun effect. That can be a lot of collateral information going into this, so just in your own study, just consider what's being said here. These it was what the leaders did is when people followed. That's what corrupted the people. It wasn't so much the people who would initiate violating these laws as far as worshiping other gods or joining in with other religions. It was the leaders who would collaborate with the people in Canaan as what they was to watch out for. Because if the priest and the judges and the officials agreed to it, they kind of handed it to the people, and it became, well, this is fine because, the priest said it's okay. This is fine because the judges said it's okay and they speak for God. And it could easily happen in the church today. It's okay if we do this because the pastor said that there's nothing wrong with it. And this is where all of us have to, just kind of keep each other, This is why we believe in plurality of elders here. I don't have the sole say so. I have two other pastors here to kind of check me on some stuff. This is why it's important that the church, the local church, understands, just as they had judges, not just one judge, in the church, we need to have pastors, not just one pastor. So things like this won't happen. Because if it's left up to a one-man show, and all a person has to do is that one person get tricked and sucked into something, and then they introduce it to the rest of the people. Okay, man.
Amen.
Let's turn to the Lord.